Good morning. I'm hoping we'll have some interesting video today. They're over there still doing infrastructure work at the dam, so says the sign. So we continue with chapter 3. We're on page 44, the method. Focus on interests, not positions. How do you identify interests? The benefit of looking behind positions for interests is clear. How to go about it is less clear. A position is likely to be concrete and explicit. The interests underlying it may well be unexpressed, intangible, and perhaps inconsistent. How do you go about understanding the interests involved in a negotiation? Remembering that figuring out their interests will be at least as important as figuring out yours. Ask why. One basic technique is to put yourself in their shoes. Examine each position they take and ask yourself why. Why, for instance, does your landlord prefer to fix the rent in a 5-year lease, year by year? The answer you may come up with, to be protected against increasing costs, is probably one of his interests. You can also ask the landlord himself why he takes a particular position. If you do, make clear that you are asking not for justification of this position, but for an understanding of the needs, hopes, fears, or desires that it serves. What's your basic concern, Mr. Jones, in wanting the lease to run for no more than 3 years? Ask why not? Think about their choice. One of the most useful ways to uncover interests is first to identify the basic decision that those on the other side probably see you asking them for, and then to ask yourself why they have not made that decision. What interests of theirs stand in the way? If you are trying to change their minds, the starting point is to figure out where their minds are now. Consider, for example, the negotiations between the United States and Iran in 1980 over the release of the 52 U.S. diplomats and embassy personnel held hostage in Tehran by student militants. While there were a host of serious obstacles to a resolution of this dispute, the problem is illuminated simply by looking at the choice of a typical student leader. The demand of the United States was clear: release the hostages. During much of 1980, each student leader's choice must have looked something like that illustrated by the balance sheet. Okay, so here's our balance sheet. As of spring 1980, the currently perceived choice of an Iranian student leader. The question faced: shall I press for immediate release of the American hostages? And in the category of if I say yes, I sell out the revolution. I will be criticized as pro-American. The others will probably not agree with me. If they do, and we release the hostages, then Iran looks weak. We back down to the U.S. We get nothing. No Shah, no money. We do not know what the U.S. will do. And in the but category, there is a chance that economic sanctions might end, and our relations with other nations, especially in Europe, may improve. And then over here, with those same an Iranian student leader. The question that they're faced with is, shall I press for immediate release of the American hostages? So if I say no, I uphold the revolution. I will be praised for defending Islam. We will probably all stick together. We get fantastic TV coverage to tell the world about our grievances. Iran looks strong. We stand up to the U.S. We have a chance of getting something, at least our money back. The hostages provide some protection against U.S. intervention. And then in the but category is, and these are negatives, the economic sanctions will no doubt continue, and our relations with other nations, especially in Europe, will suffer. Okay. And then on the next one is, I don't know what I've done here. I'm just going to read it. If I say yes, there's nothing in the category. If I say no, inflation and economic problems will continue. There is a risk that the U.S. might take military action, but a martyr's death is the most glorious. However, category, the U.S. may make further commitments about our money, non-intervention ending sanctions, etc., and we can always release the hostages later. Whew, okay. If a typical student leader's choice did look even approximately like this, it is understandable why the militant students held the hostages so long. As outrageous and illegal as the original seizure was, once the hostages had been seized, it was not irrational for the students to keep holding them for one day to the next, waiting for a more promising time to release them. In constructing the other side's currently perceived choice, the first question to ask is, whose decision do I want to affect? With A. The second, okay, wait a minute. That with A was not. I'm going to try that again. In constructing the other side's currently perceived choice, the first question to ask is, whose decision do I want to affect? The second decision is what decision people on the other side now see you asking them to make. If you have no idea what they think they are being called on to do, they may not either. That alone may explain why they are not deciding as you would like. Now, analyze the consequences, as the other side would probably see them, of agreeing or refusing to make the decision you are asking for. You may find a checklist of consequences, such as the following, helpful in this task. Light there. See everything. Thank you for being with me. Okay, here's the other checklist of consequences. 2 is in the impact on my interests. Will I lose or gain political support? Will colleagues criticize or praise me? The next is impact on the group's interests. What will be the short-term consequences? The long-term consequences. What will be the economic consequences? Political, legal, psychological, military, etc. What will be the effect on outside supporters and public opinion? Will the precedent be good or bad? Will making this decision prevent doing something better? Is the action consistent with our principles? Is it right? Can I do it later if I want? And that's the end of that list. this entire process, it would be a mistake to try for great precision. Only rarely will you deal with a decision maker who writes down and weighs the pros and cons. You are trying to understand a very human choice, not making a mathematical calculation. Realize that each side has multiple interests. In almost every negotiation, each side will have many interests, not just one. As a tenant negotiating a lease, for example, you may want to obtain a favorable rental agreement, to reach it quickly with little effort, and to maintain a good working relationship with your landlord. You will have not only a strong interest in effecting any agreement you reach, but also one in effecting an agreement. You will be simultaneously pursuing both your independent and your shared interests. Common error in diagnosing a negotiating situation is to assume that each person on the other side has the same interests. This is almost never the case. During the Vietnam War, President Johnson was in the habit of lumping together all the different members of the government of North Vietnam, the Viet Cong in the South, and their Soviet and Chinese advisors, and calling them collectively he. The enemy has to learn that he can't cross the United States with impunity. He is going to have to learn that aggression doesn't pay. It will be difficult to influence any such him or even them to agree to anything if you fail to appreciate the differing interests of the various people and factions involved. Thinking of negotiation as a two-person, two-sided affair can be illuminating, but it should not blind you to the usual presence of other persons, other sides, and other influences. In one baseball salary negotiation, the general manager kept insisting that $500,000 was simply too much for a particular player, although other teams were paying at least that much to similarly talented players. In fact, the manager felt his position was unjustifiable, but he had strict instructions from the club's owners to hold firm without explaining why, because they were in financial difficulties that they did not want the public to hear about. Whether it is his employer, his clients, his employees, his colleagues, his family, or his wife, every negotiator has a constituency to whose interests he is sensitive. To understand that negotiators' interests means to understand the variety of somewhat differing interests that he needs to take into account. Let me take a little look right here. The most powerful interests are basic human needs. In searching for the basic interests behind a declared position, look particularly for those bedrock concerns which motivate all people. If you can take care of such basic needs, you increase the chance both of reaching agreement and, if an agreement is reached, of the other sides keeping to it. Basic human needs include security, economic well-being, a sense of belonging, recognition, control over one's life. As fundamental as they are, basic human needs are easy to overlook. In many negotiations, we tend to think that the only interest involved is money. Yet even in a negotiation over a monetary figure, such as the amount of alimony to be specified in a separation agreement, much more can be involved. What does a wife really want in asking for $500 a week in alimony? Certainly she is interested in her economic well-being, but what else? Possibly she wants the money in order to feel psychologically secure. She may also want it for recognition, to feel that she is treated fairly and as an equal. Perhaps the husband can ill afford to pay $500 a week, and perhaps his wife does not need that much, yet she will likely accept less only if her needs for security and recognition are met in other ways. What is true for individuals remains equally true for groups and nations. Negotiations are not likely to make much progress as long as one side believes that the fulfillment of their basic human needs is being threatened by the other. In negotiations between the United States and Mexico, the U.S. wanted a low price for Mexican natural gas. Assuming that this was a negotiation over money, the U.S. Secretary of Energy refused to approve a price increase negotiated with the Mexicans by a U.S. oil consortium. Since the Mexicans had no other potential buyer at the time, he assumed that they would then lower their asking price. But the Mexicans had a strong interest, not only in getting a good price for their gas, but also in being treated with respect and a sense of equality. The U.S. action seemed like one more attempt to bully Mexico. It produced enormous anger. Rather than sell their gas to the Mexican government, rather than sell their gas, the Mexican government began to burn it off, and any chance of agreement on a lower price became politically impossible. To take another example, in the negotiations over the future of Northern Ireland, Protestant leaders tend to ignore the Catholics' need for both belonging and recognition, for being accepted and treated as equals. In turn, Catholic leaders often appear to give too little weight to the Protestants' need to feel secure, treating Protestant fears as their problem rather than as a legitimate concern needing attention makes it even more difficult to negotiate a solution. Make a list to sort out the various interests of each side. It helps to write them down as they occur to you. This will not only help you remember them, it will also enable you to improve the quality of your assessment as you learn new information, and to place interests in their estimated order of importance. Furthermore, it may stimulate ideas for how to meet these interests. I'm going to stop there. Thank you for being with me. I'm continuing with the book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher, William Ury, and Bruce Patton. I appreciate you.